to think like a mountain in long time frames and be mindful of the consequences of your actions for a long time, for at least 7 generations ahead. And I think we've completely lost that way of thinking. Nature is amazingly resilient, so there is always some level of recovery, even from the gravest injuries to nature. There is some level of recovery because nature does not tolerate a vacuum.
Hello, Tim. Welcome to the Climapreneur show. You are the head of the Nature for Climate branch at United Nations Environment Program, the coordinator for UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and, the chair of, I would say, a global partnerships for 30 plus leading organization, including World Bank, United Nations, government, and private sector. But today I want to know who is Tim Christophersen and how was his journey into the space of climate action. And I'm so excited to be, listening to your journey. So thank you for being here, Tim. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be having you here today.
It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. We are, I think, in a time where this format that you produce is much more likely to reach the audience we need than going only through print media or television. So I think it's very good that you're doing this. And I want to first say that the working for the United Nations has always been my dream since I was a young activist, even before university, for the environment. So it's a great pleasure and a privilege to work for the United Nations. And I'm happy to speak about how I got here, and also what we hope to do with the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and why we need indeed thousands or perhaps hundreds of thousands of climapreneurs, as you call them, entrepreneurs who make saving the climate their full-time occupation and their livelihood.
I'm so glad you said that.
You're welcome. So I'm a forester by training, and when I was a young kid, I used to spend a lot of time in the forest with my grandfather, who was also a forester. And being in a forest still today fills me with the kind of connection with nature and the wonder that we, I think, sometimes miss in our daily lives. And when you are in a forest, you also start to think in time frames that are a bit longer than human time frames. And especially recently, our attention spans got shorter and shorter. Our project cycles, speaking of the United Nations, are dictated by election cycles, which are also short. And the type of global coordinated effort we need to stabilize the climate and save biodiversity is at least a generational effort. So we need to think more like a forest and think more like trees. There's a saying in Norwegian, actually, that you need to think like a mountain in long time frames and
Yes.
Be mindful of the consequences of your actions for a long time, for at least 7 generations ahead. And I think we've completely lost that way of thinking.
There is so much to learn from nature, absolutely so much. I would, because you talked about in trees, mountains, what they teach us. What have been your biggest learnings from nature? How has nature inspired you?
My biggest learning from nature, I think, is linked to the work I do now on the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, is that nature is amazingly resilient. So there is always some level of recovery, even from the gravest injuries to nature. There is some level of recovery because nature does not tolerate a vacuum. If you clear cut a forest, that's a short-term loss for biodiversity, even maybe a long-term loss if there are species that disappear. But that area that you've cut will spring back to some form of life, sometimes not at the same level as the forest that you've had before, and that is a big loss, but it will recover to some level, and sometimes very quickly. So we have to work with that power of nature to recover. We have to give nature the space to restore herself, and in that process also restore our own relationship with nature. Because that is really the fundamental question at the heart of this UN decade. What is our relationship as humans with the natural world? What role do we play? And I think COVID-19 is teaching us a lesson or two maybe about our place and how much we're really in control of this planet, which is perhaps not as much as we think. So this humility that nature can teach is, I think that's the most important lesson that it would be useful for all of us to reflect on. That our role is as part of nature. We are part of nature. We're not separate from nature, and we can't separate ourselves from nature. That leads to mutual destruction.
Like this is so important, and I think like these are like what I personally feel sometimes is that climate action is here to unite us, and it has that power that it can like really unite all of us, and the future is being together, the future is collaboration, and somewhere I feel that nature also teaches us that. Like do you like Tim, do you feel, because like I have like seen a few of your like a lot of places you've also mentioned this thing that together we can and together we will be, even for generation restoration, it is that together we can be the generation restoration. What does the word together mean to you, Tim? And like for people, I would say, who are into this domain creating climate solutions, people just like you, what can they learn from this term together, and what should it mean to them in the respect of climate action?
What it means to me is, first of all, that we need to shift away from that predominant paradigm that human beings are competitive. That is something we're told early on, that we need to compete in school, at university, at the workplace, and maybe there is an element to that. But deeper down, we are very social creatures, and we're deeply collaborative, and that is our true nature. Our true nature is not what economists teach us and what everybody wants to make us believe, that we are one against each other. Collaboration is our true nature, and that will come to the forefront under these difficult circumstances. Of course, we see difficulties as well. You see with the vaccines for COVID that there's a lack of solidarity at the moment between the global north and the global south, while in the country where I'm currently at, there's about more than 50% of the population are now vaccinated. The country where I normally live, in Kenya, it's more about 1 or 2%, and that lack of solidarity is something we have to overcome. And therefore, COVID is also a good test for that level of solidarity. It's a good preparation for what we will need in climate change, because with the climate change that we've already locked in, so even if we stopped all emissions today, the climate, because of the inertia in this immense system, would still carry us into dangerous territory where we will have more weather extremes like the ones we're seeing now in Western Canada and the US. We'll have more fires, more natural disasters linked to extreme weather events caused by climate change. So we will need an unprecedented level of solidarity as well in the world, and for that, COVID is a good fire drill.
That's definitely there. And like you mentioned that you are a stubborn optimistic. I am an optimistic too, because I feel that together we can really create climate solutions, and together we can do this. So like, where do you drive your hope from, or what gives you the strength, or what is your anchor for being optimistic? Like what is that you believe in, that you feel that yes, we can do this?
There there are two things that make me optimistic, and I know on my Twitter profile it says I'm a stubborn climate optimist, but maybe it's more accurate to say I'm a cautious optimist, because optimism also needs to be tempered by some sense of realism. You need to know what to push for, what to aim for. What makes me optimistic is that we have all the solutions we need already today. There's actually nothing we need to invent anymore that helps us. Maybe with the exception of good energy storage facilities at a low price. That's maybe the one piece that's still missing, but otherwise renewable energies are totally ready to be scaled up. And if governments would spend as much of our taxpayer money on subsidizing renewable energies as they spend on subsidizing fossil fuels, then we would be there already. It would already have happened. Even without subsidies, renewables now outpace fossil fuel investments, and the growth is increasing year by year. So we have all the solutions we need already, but moreover, when you look back in history, humankind has risen to challenges bigger than this one. And I mentioned the Second World War, which also required a global alliance to emerge. It required a lot of sacrifice, but humanity has prevailed. And what came out of the Second World War, with the creation of the United Nations and with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is a better world. And I think climate action cannot be about stopping something or stopping us from enjoying life. No, it's about building a better world. We have to keep our focus firmly on that, because it is all these things that we are talking about in the Sustainable Development Goals, right? Clean air, clean water, equality, justice, gender empowerment. All of those are very important also for climate action, and they will result in a much better world for all of us. And I think the historic parallels to overcoming big challenges that humanity has faced are make us hopeful. Of course, those were difficult, very difficult times, and this will also not be an easy time. It's already not an easy time, and it will get much harder before it gets better. But we will, if we stick together, we'll eventually turn the tide.
Right. The point that you mentioned, that all the solutions we need, we have it today. And the earlier thing that we were talking about, collaboration, through my work as well, that I have come across a lot of people doing amazing work, creating absolutely amazing solutions. Sometimes I wonder that, for example, a solution that is created in India, what if there's a collaboration that people around the world can access it, of say I would say someone from London countryside has created something, a solution exists, but how about a system where people can collaborate, that solution could reach different parts of the world? Because honestly, I also feel that solutions do exist, but somewhere what lacks is the penetration of these solutions. Because I don't know, I might be completely wrong here, that unless and until these solutions penetrate, a lot of people, we need these solutions to penetrate so that general public can use these solutions, and then it can actually be the the new behavior norm. For example, I had someone on the podcast, he's Nathan from Coco Trade. So he created world's first bean to bar single origin chocolate, which is paper free, which is pulp free. Even his wrapper is free of paper, and that is so amazing. And I feel that these are the innovations like this, if they could just traverse the continents, traverse the boundaries, and that is why I feel that together is the way to go. But challenge I see here is that how can we actually how can these solutions actually penetrate deeper into the I would say the economies, the markets? So this is one of the challenges that I see.
The UN Environment Program runs a little team out of Denmark called the Climate Technology Center and Network, and the purpose of that center is to spread climate technologies and help countries access emerging technologies. And it's a very small it's a small team, but the but it is part of the Climate Change Convention. So it's important that we use systems like that, and there are many others platforms where you can post these kinds of solutions for uptake, but also the work you do is of course important for that, to spread the awareness about these kinds of solutions. So it's one of the opportunities that the digital age gives us, that these news can travel extremely fast, and whereas 50 years ago this would have taken many years to travel around the world as an idea, now that can happen in a matter of days. This is also something we try to really focus on, especially with ecosystem restoration and the decade that we're building a digital hub where these kinds of ideas, projects will be showcased, and then people can link to each other, have peer-to-peer learning about what kind of ecosystem restoration approach works, what kind of funding approach works. We can link projects with funders. So all of that will be on the decadeonrestoration.org website.
So now, Tim, I want to know when your journey started. How did all this happen? Like when you started and your entire journey. I know it's been a long journey. So please take us through your journey, how you started into the world of climate action.
So when I was a student and I was studying forestry, I became active in something called the International Forestry Students Association. So all the world's forestry students getting together and exchanging across borders and boundaries. So this is something I can recommend to anybody either in school or at university, to seek contact with like-minded people in other countries. Because it really enriches your horizon. And when I did that, I quickly became aware of all the challenges. Climate change was already being discussed at that time, but it was not as urgent an issue on the political agenda as it is today. But it was, we have to remind ourselves that the Climate Convention, we've had that for 30 years, and we've been talking about this issue for 30 years, so nobody can say they didn't know, even when people now my age were at school or at university. It was already known. So I became active in that field. That was my passion, which is forestry, and started to look into how we can help countries protect and restore their forest. And that's been my work ever since. I've worked with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, with European Commission, and now with UNEP for the past 15 years, in fact. So it's been a long journey, but it's been very rewarding. And what also is rewarding about this is that now with the United Nations, it is a good place to build stronger and larger coalitions, because we are a trusted platform. We're a neutral broker, if you will. We don't have business interests, but we can bring businesses together. We represent the interests of all member states, not individual member states. So it's a very useful platform in these times when we need a lot of international collaboration.
So Tim, did the little Tim, when you were a kid, did you imagine that you would be doing something like that? And, particularly, for example, I have to be honest that sometimes I also do feel anxious that, how I'm going to make it, how I'm going to do it. So at that point of your life, were you also anxious about, what the future holds, and how are you going to, be the change or create solutions? So did you had that point in your life? And how do you feel about it now, if you had it?
Well, I still have that feeling, if that helps you, because the more impactful you are in the position that you have, of course, the more you see the opportunities that you could realize, and it makes me at least feel that there's always so much more that I could do if the day had more than 24 hours. So I'm afraid that is something that we have to learn to live with, because there's always more that we all could do. There's no doubt. But at the end of the day, when you do something that you feel passionate about, like you do with this show, when you pursue a career in making climate change or climate action your full-time job, then that in itself is rewarding, and that in itself is a good result. So we also have to stop once in a while and remind ourselves that what we do is important and that we are on the right track. But I'm afraid that feeling has never quite left me, because the more senior your position in the world, the more you realize that there's so much more that should be done. And of course, it adds to this feeling of urgency, that there's more that we should do.
Tim, do you feel accountable? Like, do you feel accountable for the, for the hopes of people? Do you feel accountable sometimes that, like a lot of people are hoping, because United Nations, UNEP, and like these are the organizations we look towards. So, like, as an individual, do you feel accountable and do you feel empowered? Like, yes, I am at this position, So, do you have those kinds of feelings? Like, please share with me that.
So I have two children, a daughter who's 9 and a son who's 13, and I definitely feel accountable to them, because clearly the world that we're leaving them is at the moment, from what it looks like, not going to have as many opportunities as the world that I grew up in, and I feel accountable for changing that. I also feel accountable, of course, for my job, and it's often easy to forget how important UNEP is and how important also the role is that we play as the United Nations. What I would say in terms of accountability, that it also has to come with the right level of ability to act, and with the right level of responsibility. And here, just to share a little anecdote about UNEP and the size of UNEP, I have a colleague who works in our communications division here at UNEP, and she used to work in the United States for an advertising company, and the budget she had per year just to create and post advertisements for fast food and for a soft drink was $350 million per year. Just the advertising budget to sell more burgers and more soda. Now, with UNEP, that is more or less, well, there's a little bit more that we have, but that's more or less our entire annual budget. So we have a huge global responsibility, but almost no resources. And this is something we have to keep in mind. We have about 1,000 staff at UNEP, but the world is a very, very big place. And I wish we had a bit more resources to work on our mandate. That's something that we have to keep in mind. And that can sometimes limit what we can do.
Also, like Tim, I like you're here, and I really want to talk to us about like what is generation restoration, and how do you think that everyone has a role to play. For example, if I come and ask you that, Tim, what can I do for generation restoration? So, like, what would you tell me? And also, please tell what is generation restoration.
So generation restoration is the main hashtag that we use to share information about the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which has just started. We've kicked it off last month, and it's been very successful on social media already with this hashtag, and it's continuing to be so. We've seen in particular young people on social media pick up our Snap challenge to show how things can change quickly. And we're very encouraged by that uptake. So everybody can be part of generation restoration, because we designed this United Nations Decade with a principle called New Power. I don't know if you can see this. This is the book. It's called New Power, and it's about how you structure decision making in the age of digitization. Because we have the opportunity now, which we didn't have even 20 years ago, to really involve people like you and like your listeners, not only in communicating to them that there is a UN Decade, but having them participate and shape the UN decade. So if you, for example, if in India, in Pakistan, in China, in Germany, young people want to take action on climate change, there's many things they can do, and ecosystem restoration maybe has the benefit of both helping against climate change and against biodiversity loss at the same time, plus having a lot of other benefits. But it's one of the avenues you can choose. And to be part of Generation Restoration, we are building a digital hub that you can log on to that will allow you to find projects close to you that you can either be a part of or help to start. It will allow you to find information about activities that you can take in your community. We've posted online a little publication we call the Ecosystem Restoration Playbook that gives you some guidance on what you can do, everything from cleaning up a beach to changing your diet and your habits and becoming politically active. But most of all, why we've designed the decade in this way is that we want to generate more political will. Because India, for example, has pledged to restore 26 million hectares of degraded landscapes in India. That is massive. It's a bit under 10% of all of India. It's huge. But where are these areas, and what is the government doing? Where are they investing? For example, the $5 billion that India has collected in the so-called Kampa Fund for restoration. These questions should be asked to the government to encourage them to take decisions on this and also to move faster and to prioritize where they want to invest. So becoming politically active is probably the most important ask that we have to young people and to you and your listeners. Ask these questions to your local authorities, to your state government, to your national government. What are you doing about ecosystem restoration? What are you doing about halting biodiversity loss, about climate change, about livelihoods in rural communities? So this is why we've set up the decade in a way that everybody can be part of that global movement.
I love the way that you mentioned that restoration is all about, building community and purpose as well as rebuilding nature. Like, it puts it so well that it's like the earlier point that we were talking about, nature and we all are in synchrony. And I think that to me is the most beautiful element of restoration. So, and you remember that I think it was yesterday only that you actually posted a video of a lot of musicians coming together on the restoration. So what did you what was the the most amazing element for you in that video, or why did you sort of like that video, or what do you think was the highlight there?
There's two things that were amazing for me. The first thing is that I only found out about this video yesterday myself. So it's not something that we asked anybody to do. It's something that they did themselves. And this is exactly what we want. We want people to say, wow, this is a great idea. Let's do it. The second thing is we have to remember that art, music, and culture are not just luxuries in our lives. They are an essential expression of who we are and what is our purpose in life. And again, with the predominant economic doctrine of our time that it's all about efficiency and making money, these things can be forgotten. And if you forget art and music and culture, you also forget your identity as a human being, who you really are. And we have to be reminded of that, especially in times of COVID, because musicians and people who perform and work in arts, they also suffered a lot of setbacks. There were no public performances. A lot of them are out of work. There's no sufficient support. So I think it's a good reminder that we need to stick together, and we need arts, we need culture, we need music in our lives, and it can be a positive power for change.
Definitely. And one of the other things, firstly, the energy and the power there was amazing. And second thing to me is I always feel this thing and tell this thing to people on the podcast as well, that climate action is actually transdisciplinary. And like whatever your skill is, for example, if I love to draw, someone else say loves comedy, you can actually integrate your passion into climate action. And just imagine if all the people around the world are doing the same thing, integrating their passion to climate action. The change would be like, revolutionary. And to me, that is one of the most amazing elements of, climate action.
Let me mention something here which is quite important, since you are relatively young, and I assume many of your listeners are as well. We have to remember that people who are in power now, and many of our politicians, for them the urgency of climate action is often not yet clear. They don't understand that this is not just any other political problem. Like, it's also very important to address many other political issues that have been around for a long time and that are persistent, like equality and gender empowerment, poverty, zero hunger. Those are all pressing issues. What is different with climate change is that if we don't address it now sufficiently, it will overtake every other issue: peace, security, clean water, food security. It will become the mother of all issues if we don't deal with it right now in a very, very significant way. That is, at least at the level of what we've seen in terms of government response for COVID, at least. So that urgency is not clear to our politicians, and you have to help make that clear. Otherwise, we'll not see action at a significant scale.
So, Tim, my final two questions to you would be, what is your purpose? Like, have you been able to define your purpose?
It's a good question. My purpose is, I think, at the moment, to be in the role that I am in, and preparing this UN decade on ecosystem restoration has been immensely fulfilling. I really hope that more and more people will join that movement, because they say it's the objective of a good leader to create more leaders and not more followers. So we need leadership at all levels now. So being at the moment at this place that I'm at, I'm very grateful for being here, and I think that's my purpose in life, at least for now. Maybe that will change, but it's good to have to be able to work on something that is purposeful. But everybody can find that purpose right now in climate action, because it really requires all of us to become active. And no matter if you start small, action will lead to more hope will lead to more action, and this is the way we're going to together overcome this challenge.
I'm so glad you said that. This is the one thing that, I feel inspired all the time, because I feel climate action is a very powerful tool. And it's immensely powerful. It has the power to actually turn your dreams into reality for me. But yes, thank you so much for saying that. And my last question to you would be, Tim, what will be your message to all the climapreneurs out there, all the entrepreneurs creating climate solutions, or people who are just starting out? So your message for people out there.
My message to the people out there is that you're not alone. In fact, there are many, many, many millions of people who are now thinking like you. And this has not become quite visible yet, because also in politics, there's powerful business interests that keep us locked in business as usual. So we sometimes can feel this is going nowhere, but we are many, many millions, and hundreds of thousands are joining every day and are realizing that this is the challenge of our lifetime, and we can and will do this. So this is my message to everybody out there, and thanks for doing what you do.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you for being here.
And thank you for having me on this podcast.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you so much for inspiring and empowering all of us. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Good luck with your program and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Tim.